Before we begin, let me warn you. What you're about to hear are not made-up stories. These are real experiences shared by real people, and some of them might hit closer to home than you'd expect. So sit back, dim the lights. And remember, you're not alone in the dark. Our first story tonight takes us to a place where silence lingers, even the wind seems to whisper warnings. It's about a visit to a cemetery not many dare to explore, Montreux Cemetery. What happened there still haunts the one who experienced it. Turn your thoughts to the shadows, and listen closely. My friends and I used to have a paranormal research group. We had heard stories of an old abandoned graveyard. It was on a hill overlooking the PD River in Mechanicsville, South Carolina. It had been owned by a church that later burned down and was relocated. Most of the graves were sunken and most of the tombstones were broken or gone outright. They placed a huge group marker with the names of the known burials on it. The story said that it was haunted by the spirit of a young child in antebellum clothes, and a black shadow with red eyes tied to a story about a man who brought his victims to the graveyard, because it was so remote to kill them. We were excited to be there. When we arrived, the first thing we noticed, it was pitch black there. It was so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. My friend's girlfriend refused to leave the car. It was because the graveyard was so grown over with forest that it blocked all star and moonlight. Our flashlights didn't even make a dent. It was a hot, muggy night, but when you entered the graveyard, the whole thing was in a massive cold spot. My friend and I got goosebumps from the cold and fear. The temp was 85 degrees, but inside our thermometers read 62. There was a feeling of dread around the place, like something there didn't want us there. My friend said he could feel the place's anger. An anger that makes sense when you consider all the vandalism. Then when our group entered, the air felt thick, like it was resisting you and pushed you back. It was harder and harder to walk the further you went in. Someone compared it to walking on marshmallows too, as the ground seemed to grip our feet as we tried to proceed. Finally there was a sound like something rushing toward us, and we saw what looked like a black shadow with red eyes moving toward us. We all froze up at first. Then as the shadow seemed to grow in size, radiating a dark anger, we ran out of there. Then it was like the trees themselves were against us. It felt like they closed in and gripped at our clothes, holding on as we tried to leave. We finally made it out, and when we went to leave, one of the car's batteries was dead, though it was only months old, like something had drained it. We called a local tow truck, but the driver refused to go until morning, because he said it was evil and haunted at night. We got pictures with so many orbs and shadows. One picture even showed moss that looked like a man's shape hanging from a tree. We also got EVPs full of what sounded like angry whispers. It was the scariest paranormal investigation I had ever been on. We never did go back. Our next story seems innocent at first, just. In the early 1980s, well before I was born, my mother was teaching in Jackson, Mississippi. It was a very hectic job, and she was glad to get back home every day a little after 3 o'clock. The first thing she would do would be to change into her running gear and go for a run. She was never a fast runner. Normally she would do about a 10-minute mile, but she continued running because fitness is good. She started out on the run one day, but there was a problem with the door to the apartment she and my dad lived in. The apartment was on the second story. As she closed the door, the lock to the apartment gave her trouble in closing and locking the door. Every time she would leave or come, it would usually take her 5 or 10 minutes to get the door locked. She and my dad often talked about getting the lock fixed on the door, but so far they had not done so. Finally, the apartment was locked, and off she went for her daily run. My mom was getting toward the middle of the run when suddenly, a jogger came up beside her. He was tall and thin, had curly gray hair, and blue eyes. He started off talking, asking questions like, "Where do you live? Do you jog every day?" etc. After a few minutes, my mom began to get uncomfortable with the personal tone he was using while asking questions. She stopped answering them. Finally, she saw a street, and she knew that if she cut over on that street, she could run back home. She tried to tell the man, "I gotta go now. Bye." Then she turned down the street and started heading home. A few seconds later, she thought she heard footsteps behind her. Not wanting to turn around to see who it was, she continued as fast as she could, probably reaching a 9 or 8 minute mile as she flew past. Finally, she saw the door to their apartment building. She ran up the stairs, saying to herself, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus, help me." She got to the door, holding on to the keys. She slipped them into the lock as quickly as she could and turned them, and the door opened right away. She ran inside, locking the door, and pressed herself against the far wall of the apartment, completely out of breath. Seconds later, she heard a stiff but friendly knock on the door. "Who is it?" my mom said, her voice cracking. The gray-haired man she met on the run said, "You know who I am, and you know what I want." Now she was completely and totally afraid, and she yelled back, "You had better get out of here, or I will call the police." She did not move. A minute or two later, she heard footsteps going down the stairs. No one else was in the apartment building. After waiting a few minutes, still not moving, she was pretty sure that the man was gone. Across the street was a prayer ministry called Bethel House of God. She called there and explained to them what happened and asked them if she could come over and if they would wait for her on the lawn. They said of course they would. She waited until they might be on the lawn, then she rushed out of the apartment, ran down the stairs, then ran across the street. My dad didn't come home until maybe an hour or so later, but he soon got to hear about it. Sure enough, every other time, the lock would still stick and take 5 or 10 minutes to fix. My mom was thankful for how God got the lock to work immediately that one time. The next story brings us out of the safety of home and deep into the wild, where something primal, violent, and unexplainable waits in the shadows. This is Charged by a Rabid Beast. I was walking my dog tonight when all of a sudden he froze and wouldn't move. He's a hound, so sometimes he does that when something interesting on the wind. I gave him his standard allotted time and tried to get him to move, but he refused to budge. I pulled, I yanked, I negotiated, dude would not budge. Then I felt the eyes on me. I didn't know where it was, but I knew the dog wasn't sniffing someone's backyard barbecue. After a minute or two of scanning, I caught some motion. Then I saw it about 50 yards away. We made eye contact and shockingly it immediately started sprinting right fucking at us, staring me in the eyes the whole time like it had a plan. It snarled, but I swear there was an evil grin on its face. I reached for my phone at first, stupid 21st century reflexes I guess. Then I realized it was moving really fast, so I dragged the dog backwards as I reached for the pepper ball gun. It got to about 20 yards from us and I was getting ready to put down a layer of pepper spray when that bastard, still looking me directly in the eyes, took a hard left into some thick brush. I've been through some shit in my life with both man and nature, and let me tell you, I was fucking terrified tonight. I'm not sure what was worse, when it was charging at us or the waiting after it had hidden in the brush. Just left wondering if it was going to shoot out and attack us from behind as we tried to retreat. The worst part of it all? You could tell that asshole knew it was a little walking biological weapon. I think he enjoyed it. Fuck skunks. Some things in life shift so subtly, you can barely notice, until one day, everything feels wrong. Our next story is about a strange disturbance, something real, yet almost invisible. This is, everything changed after I noticed it the first time, and now it seemed to change back after it happened again. Stay close to the fire, because reality itself might start to twist. Alright, so it's been about 5 to 6 years since it first happened, but as of a month ago it happened again, and I think it might be something bigger. This is a decently long story, so sorry in advance. I will try to paragraph them in order of events as best I can. So please have patience. To start it simple, about 5 to 6 years ago I was going to a McDonald's that is far from where I live. It's about a 50-minute drive and it's special. Long story not relevant. I wanted to bring a friend of mine to that McDonald's because of it being special, so we picked a day and set out early in the morning around 9 a.m. or so. About 30 minutes into the drive we were talking and I looked over because it felt strange. I never get gut feelings in my life, even now years later I haven't had one yet. I looked over and saw a truck. It to have been no younger than 20 to 30 years old. It had rust and you could tell it wasn't new. What was strange was when I was looking into it there was no driver whatsoever, and not in a way of the driver was slouched. I'm talking full on, not a single soul was in that truck, no passenger, no driver, and no people in the back. At the time I thought it was just my mind playing tricks. It was so early. However, after we passed the truck I realized what I saw and we slowed down to get a video of it, and as we did it was like the truck knew we were trying to record it and took the exit immediately from the left lane. The entire rest of the ride we were looking at every single car but saw nothing strange. Fast forward about a month, I was taking a drive on a parkway at around 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, and I drive down here almost religiously. It's a long parkway that takes about an hour to fully drive down and back if you go the entire thing, and there's almost no spots to turn around aside from the occasional ones going to beaches or beach houses. I've done it so many times I literally can do it blindfolded, and I have the exact time of how long it takes basically ingrained into me. After I get about 15 minutes into the drive I see a red light behind me, which I thought was strange at first but chalked it up to a car. It wasn't uncommon even at that time of night, so I kept driving, listening to music and drinking my water occasionally. I also occasionally look in my mirror to see if the car behind me got off anywhere or was there in case it was a cop, and every time the red light was there, no matter what bridge I went over, no matter what slight turn I would take, the red light would pop up. Seconds later, always the same distance behind me. I had thought it was a cop and slowed down just in case, but the light never got closer, so I just thought I was sleep deprived. However, about the last 20 minutes of the drive I looked back one last time to see if there were any cops because I planned on gunning it home. However, when I did I nearly swerved off the road. The red light was not only still there but was getting brighter and closer as the time went on, and mind you it was a singular static light following me, somehow getting brighter, larger and closer. Needless to say I drove faster than I ever had before. I didn't care for cops or anything, yet somehow it kept getting brighter and closer until I got about 130 it started to stop and started fading, but until I got back to my hometown I didn't slow down even after it was gone. After I got to my hometown I drove a little to clean my head and was terrified at every red light I saw that wasn't a stop light, but thankfully saw nothing, at least that I remember. Now after that incident it didn't help with the dreams I had. Nothing could describe the feelings I felt, but the dreams themselves were as follows in order of what seemed to be from my point of view a timeline that looking back is scarier to think about. They all took place days apart and weren't back to back. It spanned about 2 weeks from the first to the last one. That had a dream a day after the incident of hearing something on the stairs and immediately woke up. 2. Heard the stairs creak and woke up as I looked towards the door next to the stairs. 3. Seeing a figure sitting on the chair directly across from my bed just staring at me, no distinguishing features except 2 white dim circles as eyes. I throw a pillow at it and tell it to let me sleep. I was tired. After this dream I woke up and saw the pillow I threw in my dream on the floor where it would have been if I had thrown it. After these dreams my life only went downhill. I won't get into detail, but let's just say it was not good. Fast forward about a month ago or so I saw another car exactly the same as before, as no driver, no passenger, not a single soul in the car. It was a newer car for sure, but definitely wasn't self-driving. It was just your average everyday car. However, once I noticed it was empty, suddenly a person appeared as if he just popped up like an inflatable, only to yet again speed off and take the exit instantly. Ever since then I've been unnaturally better in a way. Sure, I still have the occasional problem and dark thoughts, however it feels like my life is different somehow. It's hard to explain, but not in a bad way for sure. However, the worst part now is I have this feeling of being watched sometimes, like I'll wake up at 5 in the morning to see my computer is on for some reason, or I'll wake up to the window being closed more than I remember. It doesn't feel bad, the feeling either, to put it simply. Think of how it would feel like being watched by a group of scientists that you can't see or hear, and you don't even know if they are there half the time, but you know for a fact when they think it's a right time to do so. They're doing everything they can to help improve your life slowly but surely, little by little, refusing to stop until they improve it even a little at a time. Sorry for the long story, I left out a majority of details, otherwise I would have had to most definitely had multiple parts, but here's the main points. Thank you to everyone who read the entire thing. It was hard to tell this story for the main reason every time I remember details I would get shivers and a feeling of overwhelming dread. However, now it's not so bad. Still, thank you for reading my disturbing story. If anyone has idea on what might have happened, I would love to hear it. Not all monsters hide under the bed. Sometimes, they sit across from you at the dinner table. Our next story isn't about shadows in the forest or whispers in the night. It's about family, and the terrifying secrets we never dare to speak aloud. This is, My Grandfather Was a Monster. Brace yourself. Hi, I'm Raul, 28 years old. I was born in a small town in the interior, countryside, of Sao Paulo. My grandmother told me this story many times, and I think I'm the only one who believes in her. Unfortunately, she passed away. But never changed her story. So let's go. In 1956, my grandma was pregnant with my mother, and my aunt was 2 years old. She was in her late 20s, married to my grandfather, who was in his 40s. He was a rotten man, even for the time. He would spend the night at the bar drinking, spending money with liquor, games, and women. When he got home, he would whoop my grandma for any stupid reason. Cold dinners, being too friendly with neighbors, or even giving more attention to the baby when he was home. He had brown, almost black eyes, that made him look like the devil when he was mad. But my grandmother could understand the drinking, the abuse, and the failure as a father. What she could not understand was why once a month on a Friday he would leave the house at 11:30 to hunt and come back in the early morning tired, with no hunt and, incredible as it seems, a loving and calm man. It would only last until Monday, but at the time, this little piece of peace, strange as it was, convinced her to still stay with him. He was the good man that she married, not the beast that terrorized her in any other day. Until she had enough. 2 months from my mother's birth was when she decided that enough was enough. With the support from her mother, father, siblings and grandparents, she finally had the courage to ask for a divorce. His response was to walk a couple feet away from her, pull out a .38 revolver and shot in her direction. It hit the pole that she was leaning, maybe 10 centimeters above head. She said that he looked ashamed after doing it and ran. A couple of days later, he poisoned the well from the farm with rat poison, not just putting in risk my grandma and her family lives, but also his own daughter. He spent that entire week at the bar, drinking, fighting, or gambling until Friday came. Grandma was almost asleep, but then he came barging on the room. She panicked for a second until she saw his expression of fear, and after a look at the clock 11:55 p.m. it became clear that he was panicking because he was late. He put his hunting clothes on and sprinted into the woods, but he forgot one thing, the double-barrel shotgun that he used for hunting. As she watched him disappear into the woods, she started to laugh, considering what he tried to do his week. Taking some clothes and running in the woods without a weapon is nothing to worry about. She looked at the beautiful night sky with the full moon shining and decided to go to sleep. 12:30 a.m., she heard the first one. A howl. It was distant, out of the farm. The dogs are fighting again with the neighbor's dog, she thought and went back to sleep. 12:45 a.m., another howl, much stronger and closer than the last. Oh Lord! I hope there's no wild dogs messing with the chickens, right baby? She said to my little confused aunt that also woke up, but the worry was not enough to make her get up. 12:55 a.m., this time, the howl was so strong and loud that it vibrated her bones. It was right outside the house. She got up immediately and went to the baby, theirs was no mistake. Something big was rounding the property, but what? We don't have wolf. Another howl, followed by something opening with extreme force, the outside door of the kitchen. She didn't hesitate for a second, grabbed the double barrel from under the bed, calmed the baby girl in the crib and pressed her hand against her belly. Nothing will happen to you, my child, and then left the room. She could hear the thing moving and breaking things in the kitchen. My grandmother never heard a growl from a big animal before that day, and I don't think ever since, feeling your bones vibrate with the sound. Not many animals can achieve this, but whatever was in the kitchen made her entire body tremble, then it stopped. Slowly, with the double barrel in her hand, she moved closer and closer to the kitchen. The door was half open. The thing was close. She could hear it locking something. First, the barrel of the gun passes through the half-open door, then Grandma with great courage pushes her head to see what is in her kitchen. It was big, at least 7 feet tall, with red hair covering its entire body, hands, and feet with giant claws. It was crouching down licking sugar off the floor. Grandma, in her terror, pushed the door slightly, making a creaking sound, which immediately made the beast turn his head to her. Until her death, she never forgot what she saw. It had a long snout, but nothing like you ever saw. It wasn't a wolf head with a man's body, nor the other way around, something in between. Every teeth coming out of its mouth was crooked and sharp, ears pointing up, but with no hair in them, but the worst part was the eyes. She recognized them, and she finally saw those black eyes full of hate in the place that they belonged to. In a matter of seconds, the beast sprinted away through the outside kitchen door, faster than any animal Grandma ever saw. She simply locked all the doors, besides the front one, which she sat in her rocking chair with the shotgun in her arms until morning. He came in the morning. His clothes were all torn up. He didn't have time to take them all. They both stared at each other for a good while. He then grabbed his bag with a few clothes, kissed my aunt's head, went over to my grandma, kissed his hand and put it in her belly, walked out the door and was never seen again. The story in the town was that after he tried to kill my grandmother twice, he just ran away with another woman. She married again and had another 11 children. And the new guy? He was a bastard too. Nobody ever believed my grandma, not her children, not even my aunt and my mother. More than 30 grandkids, and I'm the only one who believes her. My grandfather was a monster. Espero que estéis morto, ese neo, Virgilio, eu se seu segredo. I just used a.I to correct my grammar since English is not my first language. But I'm using my first draft. To hell with grammar. Art is often said to reflect the soul of the artist. But what if a space meant for creativity starts reflecting something far more sinister? Our next story takes us inside a place filled with silence, shadows, and secrets. This is my friend's studio. Turn up the volume, and don't look away. So I recently posted about an experience I had a few years back and I really enjoyed it, so I figured I'd share another one. So this one happened I think in December of 2024, me and my 2 best friends wanted to hang out, which we will call Belle and April. Belle has the hangout house, so we obviously went there, but previous to us meeting there we had talked about taking some funny vegetables. For the purpose of this story we will call them that I kick. I was the one to bring them to the function because I hadn't done them in a bit and I had some. Plus my friends are dope and were obviously down. Now, Belle at the time had a room completely separate from the house, which was the studio. The studio had a layout of 2 rooms, she had everything set up in the second room farthest from the door. And since it was the middle of winter that bitch was cold, so she had a heater on and a big brown blanket to cover up the draft that came from the other room. All of my friends including myself are relatively short, me being the tallest standing at an average woman size of 5'3", which just in itself speaks volumes. I mention this because that blanket sagged at the top due to Belle, April and myself being just a tad bit too short to properly stick the thumbtacks into the dry wall. The blanket was quite long, so it dragged on the carpet and could sit just slightly open along with it sagging at the top. So we hung out with Belle's mom for a while and waited later in the day for us to go to the studio and take them. I eat them whole, which isn't the best, but I do. April did the same but had to take sips of half-drank, flat soda to keep them down. And Belle just wasn't having it, she ended up throwing them up in a plastic bag before she could even swallow them. Me and April being the bad influences we are, Mainly I convinced Belle to eat them even after she threw them up. She took 2 Doritos, sandwiched them in there while April hyped her up while I recorded and screamed in their corner of her bed, already feeling them. Laughing my ass off, about to throw up myself at the thought of her doing this, which was my idea in the first place. So that right there just explains how it was starting off. You know, we were having fun, laughing and giggling like girls do when they hang out. Until April went to the bathroom and got into her own head. She came back just off. She said she wanted to lay down and that she wasn't feeling good. Me and Belle knew that she was just getting into her head, which eventually April fessed up that she was taking herself down into a rabbit hole of just a strong feeling of needing to genuinely be put into a mental hospital. Now at this point, I could feel an energy of just pure dark, negative, malicious intent just behind that blanket hanging. I never said anything to either of them because I'm quite spiritual. They are too, but they have a less understanding for things. I may sound full of myself, but I'm just being real. They would panic, and fear only feeds. I could just feel that it was tall and gaunt. I could feel as if something was peeking at us over the sagging part, but again I still didn't say a word, just continued on. I could feel like it was dragging its long skinny fingers across the blanket, and I know this wasn't just me tripping because I could physically see the blanket moving just as I could feel that sense of knowing. I felt like it was waiting, and it kept pacing back and forth and peeking and looking in the room. I didn't speak until April all of a sudden gasps and jumps, clinging up to me after we had calmed her down. I had asked her what was wrong, and she said the same thing, that she saw the blanket drag and something doing it. I tried to play it off as nothing for them, but I myself knew fully now, my suspicions were confirmed. I couldn't keep the truth from them because April kept asking me and begging me to tell her. I eventually looked at her and asked, "Do you really want to know?" I think it scared Belle because my tone and expression must have been too serious. She started to lay down and rolled to face the wall and covering her ears while shutting her eyes tight. However, April still wanted to know. April loves things like this, but nothing really happens to her, and she feels like it's because she lives more in town than me and Belle. I confirmed to her that there was something there, but I didn't want to say anything because I know that feeding into it will do no good for us. She asked me what I think we should do, and I gave her my best advice I could. I told her we could ignore it as if it doesn't bother us, or do what priests and priestesses do, which is mock and belittle it and treat it as if it was harmless. Me and her kept going back and forth of describing the same thing and feeling. Eventually she asks me what I thought it was waiting for, or why was it there. I didn't mean to say this, but it just sort of happened. I responded, for use to go to sleep. This is what I truly felt. I had told her since she was awfully tired that she could go to sleep, since at this point it was around 2 a.m. and the only person that was asleep was Belle. I told her I was probably gonna stay awake, so if anything happened I could put my foot down and tell it to go away. I would look the devil in the face and tap my foot while point a stern finger if I had to, even though I was shaking in my own little boots. Me and her just stayed up and talked for hours until she eventually spoke up, saying she didn't feel the energy anymore. I hadn't felt it in a while either, but again I just didn't say anything. Let's just say I was the only one who didn't sleep that night, and that Belle doesn't like the fact that whenever I come over something weird happens, is how she describes it. Both of them are convinced I have some sort of attachment or attractive energy for this sort of thing. It started like any other ordinary day, laughter, jokes, and a carefree evening in the park. But sometimes, the most innocent moments take the darkest turns. What began as fun quickly spiraled into fear, as headlights cut through the darkness and the chase began. This is the terrifying true story of a night that changed everything. This happened to me and my best friend not too long ago, and to this day, I'm still not totally sure what we escaped from. But I know we did escape something. We were bored one evening and decided to go out to the park near her house. It was late, but we were only going there for a smoke, just walking around, laughing, joking, doing that thing where you freak each other out on purpose. The park looked eerie in the dark, sure, but it was familiar, so we didn't think much of it. We ended up goofing off by one of the playgrounds, and while we were chilling, I started getting this weird feeling, like we were being watched. I chalked it up to the vibe and tried to shake it. But then I noticed shapes in the distance. Not people exactly, more like shadows that moved when you weren't looking straight at them. It gave me goosebumps. My friend was obviously creeped out too, because she said, "Let's take the other path out." So we head down the opposite way, trying to keep things light. We loop around, start heading toward the street, the only way out without doubling back, and that's when it gets really weird. A car pulls up to the exit of the park. It's just sitting there with its headlights on, pointed directly at us. We don't think much of it at first, until the car starts slowly creeping forward. No one gets out. No window rolls down. It just rolls toward us. My friend suddenly grabs my arm and says, "We need to go. Now." We bolt. But in the panic, we split. She runs back toward the park. I run toward this random row of driveways with cars parked along them. The car follows me. I don't know how I thought of it, but I dove underneath a car and laid flat, completely hidden in the shadows. My heart was pounding so hard I thought whoever was in that car could hear it. The car stops. I hear the door open. I hear footsteps. 2 men. One of them says, "I don't think they came this way. Check the other side." I stayed absolutely frozen, holding my breath, until I was sure they were gone. I must have waited a full 10 minutes under that car before I crawled out and sprinted in the opposite direction. I eventually found my friend. She was crying, shaking. She thought I got taken. She pulled me into a hug and just kept saying, "My God, you're alive." When I told her what happened, her face went pale. She said after we split, she ran back into the park and saw a man standing by the gate. He cracked his neck, crouched down, and stared at her, like full-on eye contact, unblinking. Then he smiled. She ran and hid until it was safe to come out. We both walked all the way back to her house, took us nearly 2 hours, and we didn't sleep that night. We haven't gone back to that park since. We still don't know what those people wanted. But I can tell you this, they weren't just messing around. Stay safe. And if you ever get that gut feeling something's wrong, run. Some places aren't meant to be lived in. I found myself in a quiet village where every shadow whispered secrets, and every corner held something unseen. The house I stayed in, built over a graveyard. This isn't a dream, this is the nightmare I lived through. Since my last post got some attention, I figured it's time to share more. Every time we visited my grandparents' house, strange things happened, things that couldn't be explained. Paranormal things. For example, people who aren't really people. There's a room across from the kitchen. The floor connecting the rooms is just old, cracked concrete. That room was used for sleeping, sitting, even eating. But something was off about it. At night, when everyone was asleep, an old woman would appear, sitting in the chair facing the TV. She never moved, never spoke. I saw her myself when I was a child. Then there were these other entities. We never knew their intentions. One woman had rope-like hair and usually appeared behind the rooms. Another old woman stayed near the bathroom, always sitting in a decaying chair. We never understood why they were there or what they wanted. The TV used to act strange too. We thought it was broken. One time, we were outside in that open cement area. Kind of like a living room, and we heard the TV's volume rise and fall. My mom said she saw a child, walking in from behind the room next to it. He played with the TV knobs, then vanished. My aunts once finished cleaning the kitchen and stepped outside. Suddenly, a strange, human-like figure, but not quite human, descended from the tree leaning over the kitchen wall. Its skin was dark, and it walked with a limp. It crawled through the closed window, stayed for a few seconds, and then disappeared. The kitchen was a mess after that. Snakes used to appear often. So did geckos. And the cats, some of them were just wrong. One of the strangest cats was a black one with white patches. They say it was an old spirit. It didn't flinch when approached, didn't meow, and would only eat things like puffed corn and juice, human food. It even used the toilet like a person. Many of the cats there did. One cat never left my grandparents' bedroom. And the voices? They would literally call your name. One time when my mom was younger, around 4 a.m., she went to wake up a relative who used to drive students to school. She knocked on the door and suddenly heard a woman's voice. "What do you want?" "People are sleeping." She ran back to the house in terror. To this day, when she tells the story, she still shudders. These entities, when angered, they'd throw small stones. A warning. A sign you should leave. And on top of all this, we kept hearing warnings from others in the village, that they practiced witchcraft. That they could hurt people. Eventually, we learned the truth. My grandmother, she was one of them. So was her eldest son. It was passed down. But not for protection, not for healing. Only for harm. They don't do this magic with wands or words. It's not fantasy. It's blood. Real blood. And sacrifices. They're like a darker version of Harry Potter, real, cruel, and terrifying. The people there hurt each other with no remorse, using the worst kind of evil, witchcraft and black magic. They've harmed their own. My grandfather. My uncle. And even now, they're still living there. The animals are vanishing. Fewer dogs. Fewer livestock. And the air? It feels heavier. Something dark lingers. We haven't visited in about 8 years. We're religious, and we have our ways to protect ourselves from evil, so we stay far away now. We only found out the truth about my grandmother 2 years ago. But those strange entities. Where did they come from? And what do they want? No one deserves to be dragged into darkness because of someone else's greed. Some victims have faces we know, others have names never spoken. If you made it this far, say a prayer for their dead, to rest in peace. And for the living, to be shielded from every unseen evil. They say the eyes are the window to the soul. But his eyes, those glowing green eyes, didn't belong to anything human. I saw him once, and I prayed I'd never see him again. This is the chilling story of the green-eyed man. When I was around 11 to 12 years old, my dad would send me outside at night to turn the generator off in our old creepy shop because we live off-grid and can't leave it on. At least at the time we couldn't. I hated doing this because I used to be a real big scaredy cat and the land has history, so all sorts of wacky creepy things happen here all the time. Mind you, I am 15 now and will be 16 in September, and a strong believer in lizard people along with a bunch more controversial things. I bring this up because we used to have a neighbor, and for what I believe to be safety, we will call him D. The reason why I say my safety and not his will become clearer and clearer as I recount my experience. D was an odd duck to say the least, which is saying something coming from me and mine being the crazy family that lives in Dingleberry honky-tonk land of the have-nots, small-town kooks. D lived in the house down the dirt road that I currently live on. The only difference is that he bought the house that quite literally was worth a couple million, and we live in a house that we are fixing up. D was a minimalist and a vegan when we used to be vegetarians, which in a way sort of fit how my dad liked things. This guy dressed real love guru vibes, like full-blown monk, but one catch, the man was whack. He was creepy to the max. Don't get me wrong, I have other neighbors, but most of them are old married couples that came here for the same reason in mind, to get away from society as much as possible, so we don't interact much. Not this guy. He was constantly over, constantly inviting us over to his house for dinner, constantly asking personal questions, just overall up in our business in an unsettling in the sort of way that felt like he was fishing for information. Not that we had anything to hide, it's just that it's off-putting. And another thing that took me off guard was that my dad agreed to all of these last-minute meetings, a completely out-of-character thing for him to do since he is quite the hermit and doesn't get out much as is. Now, I'm gonna do the best I can to describe this. D just looked cold-blooded, which sounds crazy, but you had to be there to see it and understand what I mean. The man rarely blinked and he would turn his head in a very reptile-like fashion when you spoke to him. Kind of like Mark Zuckerberg, how he has that look and demeanor. He would walk down the road all the time during the day playing a ukulele, which again just an odd man. Anyways, one night I was sent out to do my dreaded duty as usual, but I got just a gut-twisting feeling in my core which caused me to stop on my porch and see an average man-sized, green-eyed figure standing to my left in my driveway looking at me. Me being me, I got scared and tried to build up the courage to go and turn off the generator, knowing that Dad would discredit me and make me go do it anyways. I couldn't build it, so I went inside after staring back at it for what felt like forever and begged my dad so to come and look just for what I thought to happen. I begged and begged, but I had to face the chore, making me leap off the porch, take off running for the creepy dark shop, turn it off, run back to the porch past the green-eyed man and back inside safe and not so sound. The second encounter I had pretty much the same thing happened, only it was closer this time. And the fact that I got my dad to actually go outside after like 10 minutes of begging, he tried to play it off as a fox, but I wasn't buying it. I knew he was only telling me that as to not panic me or frighten me further. The third time it was across the dirt road standing in between my garage and other house. That night was a full moon, so I could see things a lot better, but it was still obviously dark. We were dead on from each other and I knew that nobody was gonna help or comfort me, so I had to puff out my little chest after I built myself up and tell it with as much authority that I could grasp that it wasn't welcome here and had to leave and never return again. I did so. It ran. That still gives me the creeps because I, in the light, seen it turn and its legs run in the direction of D's house, its pants, and I heard the pant legs rub together as he ran. I never saw it again, but I'm convinced it was that neighbor. And before anybody tries to fact-check me, I already did the research. No contacts don't glow in the dark, and usually green and red eyes mean predators. You've heard the legends of the black-eyed children, soulless, silent, and terrifying. But what if I told you something even more disturbing exists? Children whose eyes aren't black, but blinding white. This is the story of how I was haunted by the opposite of black-eyed children. And it's far worse than you think. To preface, I am a 24-year-old female currently living in North Carolina, but mainly split my year birth, though 13, moving back and forth from West Virginia, where my dad's family is from, to Ohio, where my mother's family is from. This also requires some backstory. Now typically, you'd assume that living in Appalachia is where this all began, but oddly enough, I had experienced what I can only call supernatural experiences as far back as I can remember, even starting in Ohio. I began to speak very clearly and early in life. By 2, I was able to hold almost a complete conversation due to the fact my parents never baby talked with me. Because of this, I began to ask questions, some annoying little kid questions, but some, my parents had no real answer for. I would ask, why can't I use a big girl cup? In the same sentence I would ask, why is there a blue ball in the corner of my room at night? Most of the time my parents shrugged it off by saying, you were just having a dream, and at that age, why would I push further? When I was 3 or 4, we moved into a 2-story townhouse in Ohio. I wasn't typically a kid who was scared of the dark, but in that house, I began to demand that my father would read to me or stay in my room until I fell asleep. For a while, this seemed to work, but my parents did not want me to get in the habit of needing an adult in the room just to fall asleep, so they bought me a nightlight. While yes, the nightlight helped, I was still terrified, not of my own room, but the hallway that I would see from my bunk bed. My bed was pushed up against the back wall with a window at the head of my bed. On the wall directly across was my double closet with double sliding doors. The rest of my room held my small foldable chair bed that I'm sure anyone born in the 2000s had, along with my other things and toys. From the head of my bed, laying flat, I could turn to my left and see partly out of the window, whereas if I turned right, I could see directly out into the hallway where my parents' bedroom was just out of view. this was the source of my fear. I refused to keep my door shut because I could constantly see and hear things in the hallway, and having the door shut kept me almost paranoid as I could hear it but not see it. What I saw on a nightly basis after my parents had gone to bed was a full woman, seemingly soaked with water, pacing the hall while absolutely sobbing her eyes out. She never spoke or even looked up at me, but at a very young age, I knew this wasn't right. Who was she? Did my parents let her in? She's crying so loudly, how wasn't this waking my parents up? These questions plagued me every night, and I asked my parents about it and got the same response, that it was just a nightmare. In my parents' room, there was this old vanity with a mirror my mother kept covered up with a cloth. I had eventually determined that the closer I got to it, the scared I was, but because of this is where she hid candy and gum. One day while she was asleep, I decided to try to steal a piece of gum. I went upstairs into her room, and while looking at the vanity, I swear to God I saw the woman who roamed the halls at night sitting in the mirror looking at me. I screamed and started crying, alerting my mother, who quickly ran into the room and threw a blanket, now fully covering the mirror, and promptly explained to never go into her room alone. The rest of the time at that house was a blur. I remember visiting my grandparents much more with my mom, who was just trying to get out of that house until we were ready to move. When I was 6, we moved back to West Virginia for the second time. We lived in a house 2 houses down from where my grandparents lived, and despite still seeing random orbs and apparitions which I had become somewhat accustomed to, not much happened, that is, until we moved into the house directly next to my grandparents. That house was built in the 30s, and it showed, from the super thin glass to no circular air or heat. Beyond that, the people who lived there before us weren't just certified hoarders but left some very curious renovations. The house was built into the side of a steep hill. It once has a back porch, but 4 plaster walls had been constructed around it, making it a laundry room. There was no insulation, and the floor was so sensitive you had to walk a very certain path to ensure the wood would just give out. With this, they enclosed an exterior window, making a window from my room look directly into this makeshift laundry room. Interesting things were also found throughout the house. A board-up fireplace, padlocks on the outside of bedroom doors, light switches far too high up for any child to reach, and the crawl space. The crawl space was the worst. To get to it you had to go around to the back of the house. Before moving in, my father took a crowbar to the padlock on the old wooden half door. There was no floor besides dirt, and it smelled of mildew. I feel like you're thinking, well, that's what a crawl space is, and you'd be correct. It was what was found inside that was the last straw for my parents to end up calling the cops on the previous tenants. The past owners had a lot of kids. More kids than they could handle. They had 6 kids, 2 parents and a grandparent living in that 2-bedroom hoarder house. Apparently, they thought it a great idea to make this crawl space a bedroom for their youngest boy. When we opened it, we found a bare mattress, a small desk, a few toys and crayons, and just sad drawings. Again, I like to reiterate, West Virginia, temperatures below freezing in the winter, dirt floor that wasn't flat but on a slope, no power, and they had a 6-year-old boy living, most likely locked in. As soon as my parents realized what they were looking at, they had me go play at my grandparents' house until the cops came to document this. Once we finally got the house livable, we moved in. The layout was odd. As soon as you walked in, to the left was my parents' bedroom, which had a closet which at some point was made into the smallest bathroom ever. To the right was the dining room, and if you walked past the dining room, there was a small room we used as an office because it was at some point a sunroom turned into an entrance room. Back in the dining room, if you kept going you find the living room and then the kitchen. To the left of the kitchen was an odd walk-in pantry that led to the aforementioned makeshift laundry room. Back out to the living room, if you turned left, you'd find a crossroads with a bathroom on the right and my bedroom on the left. Welcome to my bedroom. To the left was a light switch too tall for me to reach, mind you no other light switches were like this, a bookshelf and my closet. To the right was my bed shoved in the corner against the wall that had the exterior window that actually just looked into the laundry room. Past my bedroom was an open walkway into my playroom. Immediately after moving in, I began to have actual nightmare. Ones where I was being stalked or chased. It wasn't long after that I began going to church with my grandmother. She was devoutly Southern Baptist, and living in that area, church was really one of the only activities available. Some part of me hoped that reading the Bible and praying would make it go away, but it didn't. Every night I would say my prayers, sign hymens, and read my Bible. I even slept with rosaries my Catholic godmother gave me, but it didn't stop him. Like clockwork, the knob of my closest would slowly fall out. It was solid metal, so it would still make a loud clanking noise as it hit the carpet. I would lay there, completely still, yet my eyes fixed on the door. The door, which was hard to open considering the carpet in front of it was over its threshold, would open. Inside would be a boy. I vividly remember him. His head was too large for his body. His hair was short yet had greasy black bangs. In fact, every part of him looked greasy. He stayed huddled in a ball but turned to look at me, and oh my God, those eyes. Eyes twice or triple the size they should be, and while every part of him was black, his eyes were almost a blinding white. His facial expression wasn't in malice but almost a cry for help. I remember being so terrified I couldn't move. This was no nightmare or sleep paralysis though. Multiple times I would sit up trying to examine him further or get the courage to run out of my room. I would beg, in tears, to not sleep in my room. I had told my mother about it so many times. She was actually becoming concerned either for my mental health or that I was somehow right. One night, I was allowed to stay at my grandparents' house and my mother slept in my room, and she saw it. She saw him. Besides myself, my parents were not religious but spiritual. After she encountered him, she contacted my godparents who came along with their priest to bless the room and house. After that, things just got worse. Physical things started to happen, like books falling off of shelves and me waking up with bruises and scratches. We couldn't take it anymore. Finally, it was bad enough that we all moved in with my grandparents in Ohio until we could find an apartment. Years later, my mother admitted to me she was and felt everything too. She just never wanted to admit to it and scare me. Once I got away from it, it doesn't torment me like it used to. I can sleep well and have not needed a special routine since moving out, but sometimes, I swear, if I'm back in West Virginia, I can feel him right inside a closet door to this day. Some dreams fade by morning, but not this one. For 7 nights in a row, the same nightmare returned, darker, louder, more real. The line between dream and waking life began to blur, until the dream wasn't just in their sleep anymore. This is reoccurring nightmare for 1 full week. I'm telling the story to see if there was anyone else that has experienced anything similar. The story that I'm about to tell happened about 8 years ago now. It's 100% truth and easily one of the weirdest things that I've ever happened to me. Just a little backstory. Me and my aunt got into a very nasty argument about her using drugs again, which led her to leave the house. Later that night she died. We found out the next morning. That whole morning was weird. Our cat had gotten out of the house and brought back in a black crow that was screaming because of the cat catching it, and many other strange things happened. I went to sleep that night, and this is when the nightmares started. Each night for a week, the same dream would start back up again and just continue a little bit more from where it ended the night before. It almost didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a weird reality. The first night of the dream, I was stuck in my living room hearing chains dragging across the concrete and a woman crying coming from outside. I could look around, but I couldn't move. I remember in the dream looking at the mirror that was in our living room and seeing myself in it. And just feeling this immense presence. The second night everything was happening again, but I can move around this time. As I went to the door, there was a lady in chains crying and screaming, getting dragged by a creature, and as I went to open the door I woke up. Third night picked up where it left off the second night. I still wasn't able to open the door, but the lady's voice became more familiar. Tried to call out to her, but nothing came out, and I woke up again. The fourth night it started over again. I was now able to walk around, see myself, hear things outside and feel the weird presence, but I couldn't open the door. The handle was like hot. I remember touching it and waking up in tears looking at my hand, thinking I burnt myself. The fifth night was when it got the weirdest. I was able to open the door and the creature looked up at me. It looked like a goat but was standing on two legs and was big with this ripped up outfit on. It had yellowish orange eyes. Its whole presence sent chills down my body and stuck fear in my heart. Sent me waking up, covered in sweat and crying. The next 2 nights were the situation, but I finally realized who the lady was. It was my aunt begging not to be drugged back to Kensington Avenue, screaming she doesn't want to be there and that I need to help her. She's stuck is what she kept saying. I finally was able to open the door. I took one step outside. The creature turned to me and let out an ear-piercing scream that made me freeze in my place in fear. It started talking in a language that I didn't understand as it dragged her back up the street into what she described as living hell when she was alive. Each night after the dreams were over and I woke up, it didn't feel like I was dreaming. It real, just as real as the tears running down my face and the beads of sweat on my body. No one could explain it, nor have they experienced anything similar. Some said it was me grieving, others say it was a demonic presence that was attached to us. I was never really a very spiritual person, but my grandparents were. We prayed each night until the dream stopped. I'm telling the story to see if there was anyone else that has experienced anything similar. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I've heard ghost stories before. I used to think they were just that, stories. But what I experienced wasn't a story. It was real. It didn't just scare me, it scarred me. This is the chilling account of the ghost that traumatized me for life. I remember it so vividly. I was 12 years old and had just recently moved into a new house in rural Missouri. It was a winter school night. Well, school morning. I woke up randomly at exactly 5:23 a.m., a couple hours before my alarm clock would go off, which wasn't a normal thing for me as I was a heavy sleeper. For a little context, I only had a twin bed and a nightstand next to it with my alarm clock on top, and an empty bookshelf across the room. Like I said, we just moved in, so my room was pretty empty at the time. I stared at my alarm clock for a moment, still half asleep, before I felt a weird chill up my spine and felt that someone was watching me. I then turned my head over to the end of my bed to see the silhouette of my little brother, who was about 7 years old at the time, standing at the edge of it in the darkness. My first instinct was to get angry at him. "Xander! What are you doing in my room? Get out!" Silence. "Xander!" I said again as I sat up in bed. But the only response I got from him was him taking a few steps closer to me. I leaned in closer, and he did as well, but very much more than I did. I then see through the moonlight that this isn't my little brother at all. It's a faceless child, inches away from my face. It didn't have hair, clothes, nothing. Just white skin. It almost looked like Dear David, if you've ever heard about that story before, except without the caved-in head. The moment I realized this, I screamed as loud as I could, which seemed to startle it. My scream sent it flying backwards to the ground, and it knocked my alarm clock down in the process. It began to crawl backwards, almost spider-like, into the corner of my bookshelf and curled up on the floor, burying its head into its knees. This is the moment when my mom came and turned on the light and asked me what was wrong. When she turned on the light, it was gone. I was sobbing and shaking and told her what had happened, but she said I was only dreaming. I tried telling her that no, I was very much awake, and pointed to my alarm clock, which was face down and halfway across the room. She still insisted it was just a dream, but let me sleep in her room regardless. I didn't even enter my room for 2 weeks until my mom had forced me to. I never saw it again, but that didn't mean me and my family were ghost-free. We constantly heard things. Cups sliding across the counters, bells ringing, child voices, etc. I'm 23 now, and when I look back on that memory, I know it was probably just a child's spirit that was curious. And if that's the case, I truly feel bad for it. But it still traumatized the fuck out of me. I just recently talked to my mom about this. She said that actually, she believed me at the time and was just as scared as I was. She just didn't want to scare me even more by validating the experience. To this very day, I try not to look for him in the dark at night. If you've made it this far, congratulations, you're braver than most. These weren't just stories, they were real experiences, shared by real people. Now, take a deep breath, and remember, the next time something creaks in the night, it might not be the wind. If you enjoyed the chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever experienced something you can't explain, we want to hear it. Until next time, sleep tight, if you can.